Ready graphics? Ready theme?
Good evening. For your information tonight.
It was directed by Barnet Kellman.
Is directed by Barnet Kellman. It is directed by Barnet Kellman.
Hey, we've heard that name before.
We have. It is directed by Barnet Kellman.
Again. And directed by Barnet Kellman.
Directed by Barnet Kellman.
Oh, yes, it was directed by Barnet Kellman.
Barnet Kellman.
What? No. Stop. Yeah. Kellman, comma, Barnet. Hi, this is Jessie Mullins.
And this is Lauren Milberger.
And we have a very exciting interview for you today.
Yes, we're going to end our talk on season 1 with an interview with Emmy Award-winning director Barnet Kellman. He directed the first 4 seasons of Murphy Brown, except for 2 episodes in season 4. Mm-hmm. And we thought it would be a really great sort of cap to the end of our season 1 talk.
It's a lovely little retrospective, and he brings so much delightful detail and behind the scenes, and he even gives us some feedback on things we have said already.
Yeah.
Which we completely geeked out about that we got to have this conversation.
Yes, I mean, obviously Barnett's name has been a name that we have read about and seen on screen.
Said every episode.
Every episode, yes. So we wanted to give you a little extra background on PhD Barnet Kellman that you may not be familiar with.
Dr. Kellman. This is from his profile, actually, at the USC Cinematic Arts School. It says he was educated at Colgate University and the Yale School of Drama, which he mentions briefly for us. He received his PhD from Union Institute at Antioch, a recipient of the prestigious Danforth Graduate Fellowship and the Thomas J. Watson Fellowship. He has traveled to observe the work of theaters throughout Europe and the United States. In addition to teaching at USC School of Cinematic Arts, he has been on the faculties of the American Film Institute, Columbia University Film School, CCNY, NYU, the Circle and the Square Acting School, and has served as a resource person at the Sundance Institute June Lab and the Eugene O'Neill Theater Center's National Playwrights Conference.
And as well as having an Emmy for Birth 101, the season 4 finale, his last season working exclusively on Murphy Brown. He did come back for the finale. Mm-hmm. He also has a DGA award for the pilot.
So he's done a few things.
Mm-hmm.
And we got to talk to him as well about his work as an educator. So please look forward to that.
If you like this interview, please leave us a review on iTunes. It would mean so much to us. You can also follow us on social media at Murphy Brown Pod on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Yes, and you can find us on our website at murphybrownpod.com. That's where we have an FAQ to get us to the Spotify playlist, the Murphy Brown Empowerment playlist, with music from and inspired by Murphy Brown. You can also email us at our Gmail, which is murphybrownpod@gmail.com.
So enjoy this episode, and we'll see you next week for part 2. Will the mystery guest please sign in?
Hello, I'm Barnet Kellman, director.
Very nice.
Very succinct.
Excellent line reading.
Yes, welcome to the show. Thank you so much.
So glad to be with you.
Yes, we appreciate you coming on the show.
Well, we appreciate, as you've shared with us that you have listened to a few episodes, that we appreciate that you're sticking with us as we continue to laugh about how, look, it's your name again.
Yes, we have 4 years of that.
Yeah, the vision that is Barnet Kellman's.
Well, that was a rare opportunity, a rare privilege to, be able to do all those episodes and just be working with a repertory company the whole time.
Well, and I'm not sure a lot of people, consumers of television, always realize that it's rare to have one director for that long to be able to really shape that vision, and it's not trading off per episode.
It is rare. It shouldn't necessarily be as rare as it is. People must have different reasons. I'm talking about writer-producers. I'm a little cynical about it. I think that there's two, especially in the days when I was doing it, there were two dynamics at work. The shows that that were considered really high quality and really plum opportunities had the opportunity to land a director and get a full commitment that way. Other shows didn't necessarily. People wanted to play the field. Conversely, though, some writers didn't want to have just one director. They liked the revolving door or the bullpen of directors, if you will. I found that the best writers and the most secure writers, and Diane definitely being at the top of that list, liked the idea of having a partner. I mean, that's really the reason. It's a marriage. It's a partner. It's another guiding voice on the show, and not everybody was willing to, on television, on multicam television, to let a director into that circle. Diane, more than welcomed me. She, which I'll be forever grateful and appreciative.
Well, we'd love to, we like to kind of start with everybody asking what we call your origin story. What got you into the field to begin with, or your childhood?
Oh my origin story. Well, a little bit like Diane, when we did Baby Love, I guess, and we all showed our baby pictures, and Diane's pictures of her watching the TV. I grew up, first generation glued to the box, so I absorbed an awful lot from television. I watched an awful lot of it, although I never became focused on television as a medium. So much. I was a theater guy. And in fact, in those early days of television, there was a lot of theater on television. Yeah. Playhouse 90 and all these Play of the Week. And I would watch. The Play of the Week actually would do a play and repeat it every night of the week, the same play. I mean, they would kinescope it and rerun it every single night. So I would watch Iceman Cometh, for 5, 6, 7 days. So anyway, I didn't really realize until they opened the Museum of, what was then called the Museum of Broadcasting, the Paley Center, in New York. I didn't realize how much television had influenced my theater bug. But I was already a theater director, and I knew by the time I was started as an actor, and I knew by the time I was 15 I wanted to direct. And I kind of went in a fairly straight path about that. I mean, I went to liberal arts college, so I didn't go to performing arts, or I didn't go to Carnegie or some program that but straight from college I went to Yale Drama, and then right after I left Yale Drama, I started directing new plays in New York, and I was directing. I became a specialist without kind of intending to, as a director in the premiere productions of new American plays. And into the midst of that, and one of them became something of a hit and ran for a year, which I then gave me the opportunity to do the feature version of it. And around that time, there was a new head of comedy at CBS named Greg Mayday, who happens to be, have you heard this name on the podcast before?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So Greg also happens to be from Buffalo, like Diane. And I think they actually knew each other from their Catholic schools, boys' school and girls' school kind of thing. But anyway, crazily, he was a theater bug also. And he came to New York and did something very unusual. He said that he thought that the jobs of somebody who does the original production of a new play is very similar to the job of doing a pilot for a television show, especially a live multicam television show, which is kind of like a play. And you're creating the world, you're helping design, the set and plan out the template for the staging of the show. At casting, you're casting the characters for the first time, you're helping determine all those things. And he hired me as a New York theater director. He hired me to direct a couple of pilots for him, which was an enormous leap, which I had no idea how rare that was or how unusual that was. And I thought, well, okay, I'll give it a try. It's a good way to make the kind of money you don't make in New York as a theater director.
Yeah.
And I went out and did actually 4 pilots that first pilot season. A couple of them went on the air. And then after pilot season, I just went back to New York and continued to do my theater. And then the next pilot season, I was offered a couple pilots, one of which was Murphy. And I sort of wound up out here and never went back except to visit. So that That's how I wound up over on Murphy, and in primetime television primarily.
I didn't realize that you hadn't had as much television experience then before you did Murphy. Had you done any episodic or just the pilots?
No, I had done a bit. So there was some credibility there. It wasn't completely off the wall. But it was a huge leap to being, because the list of pilot directors was extremely small, extremely short in those days, and it didn't necessarily relate to the episodic list.
Sure.
And what happened was that there was a couple of random factors. One was that at a certain point, a producer named Paul Rausch, who was kind of a very aggressive in a good sense, entrepreneurial and creative force in the daytime world, which is all there was in New York virtually was daytime television at that period. I mean, there was Kate and Allie for a while, and there was later Cosby. But the shows that did come to New York did not use New York talent. They all brought in directors, writers. They brought everybody from LA. So, but daytime was soaps were the thing, and Paul was very ambitious, and he hired actors straight off of Broadway. He cast his shows whoever was hot on Broadway and who was ever a big name. And a quality actor, he wanted them on his shows. And after a little while of doing that, he decided that he wanted theater directors to direct them and work with them rather than the more traditional technical route of multicam directors. So he trained, frankly, a whole generation of theater directors who all learned multicam in his studios. John Pasquin, me, Ron Lagomarsino, just David Traynor, people that went on to make, really big careers in that field. All were theater directors who came out of Paul's training ground. So I had something, and then I came out to visit once to LA, and I was visiting my friend Carol Kane on the set because I had directed her in 2 plays. And I was visiting her on camera blocking day on the set of the first show that the Charles brothers and Jimmy Burrows did after Cheers. Cheers was going into its second season. They did a pilot called All Is Forgiven. And Carol was one of the stars of that. And I was watching camera blocking, and Jimmy knew about me, and he knew about the play Key Exchange that I had done in New York that had run, and he just knew about it. And he came over to me and he said, "Why don't you come back tomorrow?" And I said, "No, I'm going home. I've got a plane ticket." He said, "Nah, come back tomorrow." So I did, and he gave me the first 5 episodes of that show, All Is Forgiven.
Oh, wow.
To do. So I had done a block. I didn't really know what I was doing, and I had never shot multicam film. I had only done multicam tape. So I was really learning on the job in an incredible, it was, again, another crazy leap of faith. So
that's the theater kid in you.
Yeah, I guess. And then I did that, and then they asked me to do Designing Women, and I did a bunch of episodes of Designing Women, and that went very well. But I was still living in New York, and these were just these odd things I was doing. And then this pilot thing happened. That's the origin story of how I got to Murphy.
So how do you feel your time directing theater helped you then directing television?
Enormously. It helps me in directing everything. What I'm more concerned with than anything is working with text and working with actors and making what is on the page come alive, and making what's intended to be funny, making sure that it is, protecting what's there, adding what I can, and the thing that I sort of challenge myself to do and pride myself on always trying to do is get the best performance out of an actor that they are capable of giving. That's all. I can't make them, but create the conditions and find things for them to do that they're going to love doing and they're going to look good doing.
I was going to say, we talk a lot in the episodes, and you may have heard in the episodes you listened to, that there is, and as theater kids who grew up doing these things, you see the joy of the performance in a lot of these actors, and the performances are very theatrical, and especially in these guest stars that you get, like the Colleen Dewhursts and these people who just live in that moment. And we talk about Charlie Kimbrough and how the Jim in the background is always doing something interesting, and it doesn't taking away. It's just there's a constant life. The guest stars always seem to be acting through the laughter, which just increases the moment. There's a lot that's just alive that reads theater to us.
Well, I approached, I had the opportunity to start on day one, obviously, with the pilot and with everything. And I didn't know any better than to approach it entirely as a play. And Candace will not only joke about it, but complain about me to this day, because, I rehearsed it like a play, and I rehearsed long hours, and Diane was good enough, really, seriously, to give me the hours on stage, to work everything out and have layers of texture involved. So our run-throughs, for example, and it's my fault, and they've yelled at me about it, our run-throughs were like late in the afternoon, which meant I had a day to rehearse. I had the day to rehearse and then call the writers down around 4 o'clock, let's say, which meant that they would then put in an hour or so of run-through time and notes time, and then started their rewrites. Now, the form as a whole is writer-centric. It's actually writer-centric, and it's not director-centric. It's not actor-centric very often. It's star-centric, but not, as you say, not a play. And usually, very often, a director's being asked to put it on its feet so that the writers can see and hear their words and then address everything from the point of view of changing the words. Diane, being a theater person herself, knew there were other opportunities there, and she appreciated it. And Diane and I had this thing that I've never, it's one of truly the high point relationship of my career. We had this thing where we would watch sitting either side by side or one or two seats apart during run-throughs, and we had a way of signaling each other during the run-through, which was that she knew that I was working really hard with the actors to really get them close to a performance, so that I was really shaking out the material and really trusting the material and trying to get everything out of it I could. And so sometimes when something wasn't working, and we could see it wasn't working, we would look at each other, and I would go, I would put my hands up a little bit, like, and what I meant by that was we really worked on that. And she would nod and she would make a note, meaning that they would go address that moment. Conversely, if some joke didn't land or something like that, and I thought we had missed it, but we could get it, I would sort of signal her, like, give me another shot at that. And she wouldn't rewrite it out from under us. The other shows that I had been on, the writers never gave a thing a second chance. They never gave her, so the actors were always getting one bite of the apple on a joke, on a moment, on anything. And Diane had the patience and gave us the time on stage, which was great. Again, the things that I did, a lot of what I did out of ignorance of the ethos of the culture of multicam that I was coming into. And the fact that I was an outsider. And the fact that I hadn't been trained, I hadn't been grooved in the etiquette. I didn't even know, I didn't even know what the effect of the late run-throughs were on the writers. I just assumed you need that rehearsal time, especially in an ensemble piece. I also had this other thing that enabled Diane, I think, to trust that way, which is I told the actors that I wanted to treat the script. It was my dead playwright's theory. I said, let's take the script and work on it as if it was Shakespeare, It was a play that had been proven a million times. It's new to us. The writer's dead, so you can't go asking for a rewrite. We've got to make this work. And let's approach it that way. And then let's trust the writers that if it doesn't work after we've given it our best shot, then they'll change it. Let's trust them to do that. I'd seen a lot of actors, the few shows I had done, I had seen actors essentially act a critique of the material. What they would do is if they didn't like something, they wouldn't commit to it, and they would tank it so that the writers would change it. If they didn't want to do something, that's the way they would do it. And especially, oh my God. Well, there were a lot of shows where the relationship between the stage and the writer's room was antagonistic. And there were a lot of stars who whose names won't be mentioned, but that I worked with, who had, were very talented people. They had TV series before, and they would just, at rehearsal, they would, the pilot that I did with a big television star right before I did Murphy, and as I said, I was new to town. I'll say it, it was the late Robert Guillaume, and he was a very good actor and a really very decent man, but he had already been a big star on Benson, and we were doing a pilot, and we were like having our first rehearsals, and Robert turns to the script supervisor and says, "I'm not going to say that, I'm going to say such and such." And I was from the theater. You don't do that in the theater. So I was kind of, puzzled, but I wanted to find a nice way of, speaking to this man. And I said, and be respectful, but on the other hand, work the way I thought we should work. I assumed we should work. And I said, okay, we'll take a note and I'll run that by the writers. Mm-hmm. Run that suggestion by the writers. And he looked at me like I was crazy.
Oh, yeah, it's a different world.
Wow.
And then the next time it happened, I said the same thing. We'll take that note. Please take the note. I said to the script supervisor, we'll run that. I'll bring it to the writer's room later on. And he said, wait a second. I'm not, I'm telling you what I'm going to say. And I knew that wasn't, I'm way too interested in good writing, and I wanted to work with good writers, and I wanted to make their work. So anyway, and that was the mood that I brought in on day one to Murphy. And, Diane let me do it. And Candace let me do it, by the way. Candace trusted me to do it. I mean, that's really, and her response. Also, there's another thing that's going on, which is there were very few blind dates. Well, that's not exactly true, but they weren't blind dates. We really worked hard on the casting of the pilot. We worked every single day for over a month, and we worked down to the wire. And I gave the studio I gave our casting director, wonderful casting director Phyllis Huffman, long lists of actors, including long lists of actors from New York whose work I knew, including Charlie Kimbrough, and they brought people from New York for us to see. And there were a lot of theater actors involved. Most of the people were theater actors. And Diane or I had either worked with everybody or seen everybody's work, with the exception of Pat Corley. Everybody else there was really kind of a sense that they were chosen because we thought we could play this ensemble like this together. Yeah.
So I'd love to hear how that collaboration started from the pilot and how you connected with Diane and started work on the show.
Oh, yeah, I did skip a part of the story. Wow. Good point. Okay. Yeah. Wow. So I had just done this feature, basically an independent feature with a negative pickup, a Fox pickup. So it was released by Fox, but it was a New York feature. And the producers of that, it was called Key Exchange, and it was based on the play by the same name. After we did this feature, we were looking for other other small, human, funny, similar. We were looking for more projects. And I was with William Morris, and my agents gave me a spec movie script of Diane's. And I read it, and I loved it. And this producer and I came out to L.A., and we met with Diane and Joel. And we talked about optioning this script. And for one reason or another, I can't even remember why now, it never came about. But we had a great meeting with Diane and Joel about a feature. And then, based on that, after Foley Square, gosh, I'm forgetting a lot. Diane asked for me on Foley Square. Diane asked for me for Foley Square, and the producer on that, because Diane was a baby on Foley Square, so she had two real veterans, nice guys, Bernie and Ornstein, and I'm forgetting the names. She had two veterans put with her, and I think she feels that they were real mentors and really, that she had a good, positive experience. But they were the ones that were going to have to hire me. So I had a meeting with one of them in New York without Diane. And they just said, we can't hire this guy because he's too inexperienced on Foley. So they didn't. And that was all. Forget that story. And then I got a call after I had done my first pilot season, I guess, that Diane asked for me on Sister Sam to do the first episode of the second season, and she was now in charge, right? She had her own show, and she asked for me to do the first two episodes, I think, first one for sure, of the second season. So I came out and did that, and we had a blast working together. It just was so easy. So there was a very positive feeling, even though we'd never worked together. I'd already admired her work. She had obviously liked my movie well enough to be willing to share that, so it was a date waiting to happen. I think Di would say the same thing.
So then how did that connect to starting your work on Murphy Brown?
The first thing, well, I was offered the pilot. I read the script. I thought it was amazing. More importantly, my wife, Nancy Meddy, an actress, thought it was amazing. She said, "You've got to do this." And so I signed on and spoke with Diane, and Diane told me what was going on at that point in regards to casting, which was that, well, everybody knows the story. Diane had kind of written it with Jo Beth Williams in mind, and I knew Jo Beth too, and Jo Beth was either passing or close to passing, even though they were very good friends, Diane and Jo Beth. But Jo Beth's film career was kind of taking off, and she was not ready to commit to a television show at that point. And Diane was talking about Candice Bergen, and I said, I think we both agreed that was a great idea. And that negotiation, that dance was beginning, and quickly came to fruition that we wanted Candice. And the next step, which has been much talked about and written about, was that whole, what we had to go through to get CBS to sign off on that. How that was not a slam dunk. The amazing thing, of course, to us was that Candice was willing to do it. Because in those days, what seems so obvious now, but in those days, Candice was a movie star. Candice was a movie lady. And there wasn't a lot of travel back and forth. It was kind of a one-way street, And, but Candice tells the story herself about how reading the script on the plane, she really fell in love with it, and got encouragement from Louis, and I think Louis Malle, her husband, mm-hmm. And I think she got encouragement, very important encouragement, I think, from Mike Nichols, and she was trepidatious about doing television, but then she met with Diane, and so Candy was up for it, and we then set about casting the rest of it. And that was, that was one of the most amazing and satisfying collaborative processes of my career, was sitting every day with Diane and Joel and Phyllis Hoffman, day after day, long, long days, seeing everybody in the world for these parts. The story about I had actually worked with Faith when she was 17 on a soap opera in New York.
Oh, that makes sense.
Oh, sure.
I didn't put that together.
When she'd come up as a model, she was a 17-year-old model, and so I knew Faith and but I can't say that I knew how perfect she was. And you've heard the story, how she just walked in and brought the part to life. So that was like one of the first things that happened. I mean, that just happened. Like, bang, Faith came in, Diane and I said, well, great, we're done there. And Diane had already committed to, in her mind, to Bobby Pastorelli for Eldon. And I had worked with Pastorelli coincidentally on another one-episode thing that I had done. And so we had both worked with him, both thought he was hilarious. She had conceived this absolutely original character, so we knew we had Pastorelli. So that was two. And then we got into everybody else. And I think I brought in a list of New York actors, particularly for Jim Dial. And Charlie, the two top choices on it were Charlie and a guy named John Cunningham. He's a wonderful New York stage actor, and I'd used him in the film Key Exchange. And we brought them both to the network. And John, at the time, I had seen Charlie on Broadway. I mean, I had seen Charlie for years in theater. I mean, he was a Broadway star. And so I had enormous respect for Charlie and John. And John was more like, he was funny, had a good sense of humor, but he really was that super straight. You could put him as an anchor. But when Charlie came out, when we flew them both out, and Charlie just had this extra, there was something underneath it going on that was a little crazier. And so, that wasn't such a hard choice. We went to Charlie. We had a hard time finding Frank Fontana. We were looking around a lot, and actually Joe, who I'd never met and didn't even realize, I didn't realize that Joe had done sitcoms before, and I didn't realize he'd done theater. I knew him from the film Missing.
Yeah.
He gets killed in the film Missing. But there was something about the guy that I just felt was very real. And so he was on my list, and he came in, but we were searching around because, and you guys have sort of noticed this, but there's an evolution in all those early episodes. Diane's idea for Frank originally was a much cockier guy than Joe turned out to be.
The neurotic mess that Joe turned out to make him.
He's just unraveling.
Exactly. So at the beginning, we were, forgive me for saying this, Joe, we were sort of trying to butch him up a little at the beginning. Now, Joe is a very butch guy. But seriously, it was Geraldo in Diane's mind.
Oh, interesting.
And we do talk sometimes about some similarities or moments that remind us of Geraldo moments. So that makes sense.
Yeah, I hadn't heard that before.
It was Geraldo, and Geraldo was very big, and there was something, this was before we kind of wound up sort of half hating Geraldo. There was something endearing about him, and something very underdog, but something very, you know what I mean? So Geraldo had his good moments as well as being kind of a jerk,
Before opening up the safe.
It's the pre-safe.
Well, yeah. He really became huge with the Willowbrook scandal.
Yep.
On Staten Island, which was, I think, a mental institution on Staten Island with terrible conditions, and he went out there and exposed that. So and he was this kid, he's this local kid. So anyway,
I could see him wearing Frank's bomber jacket, like that. I can see, because also I think when we talk about Geraldo now, like you said, there's a very different implication than saying Geraldo then.
Yes.
And so I can see that Geraldo in Frank.
So he had an authenticity, but there was something funny about him. You know, his ego, his vanity, and all that kind of stuff was funny. And I think that's what Diane originally had in mind. And you know, we weren't finding that so easily. I don't know why, and we saw the world. We saw the world. We could see anybody. And then, of course, the killer part, the one that went down to the wire, and I don't know if you've heard this story yet.
It's my favorite casting
Grant?
story, actually.
It's Grant. And
Yeah.
It's insane.
and there was several things going on. So we saw everybody, and we saw wonderful people. I mean, we saw Ben Stiller, and he knocked us out. In terms of his talent, he knocked us out. But we looked, he was very young and very green, and also rhythmically, he was in a different world. He was just, you know, let me put it this way. Ben Stiller has got a very wonderful, I'm a big fan of his. He's got a wonderful, very internal way of schwitzing.
Yes.
But we needed somebody that was, you know, more just desperate to please and that eager beaver thing. And in a way, Ben was kind of too cool and played it, you know, inside himself more.
I was about to say, I'm thinking about what age he would have been and thinking about when he eventually got onto Reality Bites and those kinds of, like, young Ben Stiller can play awkward. I mean, he's a great performer, but I'm trying to envision him as Miles, and Miles, he would have been too confident.
Yeah.
And then Jason Alexander, you know, read. And I had worked with Jason in New York. And Jason was terrific and hilarious and right for the part. Except for even then, Jason was going bald. So he had, you know, he hadn't lost all his hair, but it was majorly receding at that point. Even though he was probably only, he was in his early 30s. And, I think. And we just thought, you know, he just doesn't feel like he just came out of Harvard yesterday. I mean, all the jokes were like, this is a baby. Mm-hmm. So we kept looking and looking and looking. We saw so many people, and there's a funny story about how after a long 12-hour day of looking at people, we went home, and this was the week before we're supposed to go, and we couldn't find. And I got all the way back from, well, if you knew the geography, we were casting at Warner's in Burbank, and I was living in Santa Monica. And I got all the way home to Santa Monica by 10 p.m., and I got a call from Diane, come back to the lot because we got a call from CBS. There's this guy. He's so hot. The network is crazy over him. He's perfect for Miles. The network is dying, and he's got to leave L.A. We got to see him. And I don't remember the guy's name, but it was one of those things where the network said, this is it. Come back and see him. So we all reassembled in the room. And this is a terrible, poor guy story, but we were punchy. I'm telling you, we had been casting already, and we'd already all gone home. I don't know if Diane had made it all the way home, but she lived in Topanga. These are major distances. We came back to Burbank, and we reassembled in the room like at 10:30 because the guy was just getting off another set. And there's four of us and the guy, and he starts reading, and it was the bite your hand moment because we knew instantly that this guy was not going to get the part. And here we had to go through this charade and act like we weren't exhausted and we started to laugh, but we all managed to control it, Joel and Diane and I, but we were staring at each other and just holding it in. And so that we could politely thank the guy profusely for reading for us late at night and make a big fuss and get him out the door. And then we just fell out laughing like a bunch of, desperate kids, and which is what we were. And then the two of the things that happened that for me are, I'll never forget about the casting of, there's three things about the casting of Grant. One is that I had said or we had all agreed something quite obvious at the time, which was that we were really looking for a Matthew Broderick. But Matthew was already a big star. But Matthew had done all these Neil Simon plays on Broadway. So I contacted the director of the Neil Simon plays, who I knew, and I asked him for a list of all of the understudies and all of the road company guys who had ever been in consideration or replaced Matthew. And Grant's name showed up on that list. So I asked for the New York casting director to put all those actors on tape. And then Greg German came in, and Greg was an actor who I had worked with at the O'Neill Center in Connecticut in theater, and I loved Greg. I just thought he was terrific. And we took Greg to the network. You've heard this story?
Not the whole story,
No,
but we
just
know
a
that
bit of
Greg almost got the part. Yeah.
Well, he got the part. I mean, this is a painful story I think we're all big fans of Greg's. But Greg was a little bit more like the Ben Stiller version, a much more kind of acerbic and internal Miles, which is a way of saying it was very funny, but a way of having there was something about him that made him a little less vulnerable to Murphy than Grant turned out to be, right? So anyway, we took several guys I don't remember who else, to the network, and Greg won the part. And I was very happy, and we all went home, and I got a call the next morning, maybe from Joel, I don't know, but Diane had slept on it. She'd woken up and said, "It's not right. I just can't. This is not what's in my head. We can't give up." And we had to take the part back from Greg, which was very, very painful. But Diane was, listening to herself, Diana's always listened to herself, and she's right to. She's right to. She knew what she needed, and it made us go. And this was on Thursday and Friday before the Monday. This was Thursday or Friday before the Monday.
And we knew it was really close, but to hear that, yeah.
Oh, no. This was so serious. And then what happened was that we were sitting around in this place, and Diane was on the phone. She took a phone call with somebody, and they had sent us the New York tape, and the New York casting director would say, look at 1, 4, and there would be 20 people on the tape, and the casting director would give an opinion and say, just check out number 1, number 7, and we had looked at number 1 and number 7 or whatever, and we didn't like them. And then Diane took a phone call, and I started fast forwarding through the tape. And when I came to Grant, I saw him, and there was something happen. And I stopped fast forwarding and started to play the tape. And I said, Di, come here, look at this. And at that moment, we both went, that's it. That's really it. So we had to immediately fly Grant out. And he flew out. We threw him right up against the network. He got the part. He didn't come out with any clothes. He didn't come out with any toiletries. He thought he was going to go home. We said, no, you're not flying this weekend. What if you miss the plane? We'll buy you everything. I didn't say this. This is the producer speaking. But you know what I mean? They put him in the hotel. They got him a toothbrush. And that was it. That was it. The rest was history. Except for the part where I gave him my eyeglasses, which is what happened during rehearsal.
Oh.
That's so awesome.
Here, I'll show you.
Yeah. Those are his glasses.
Yeah.
You recognize those glasses?
How funny.
So he didn't start with glasses. He never wore glasses at all. But, and it was somewhere around when we were doing that first meeting and the whole Shirelles thing and stuff like that. And we were going over it and going over it and going over it.
Yeah, yeah.
And I walked up and I felt like he was reaching for certain things. Because the truth of the matter is, Diane really modeled the part in her mind on Joel, her husband. And Joel and I grew up a mile and a half from each other. We didn't know each other, but we grew up in the same neighborhood. And we both had a certain Jewish energy and Jewish sense of humor. And Grant was going to have to act that. That's not who he is. And so he was searching. He was searching around it. And of course, he ultimately found his own very particular energy. That's Miles Silverberg, and it's not, in no way a cliche, but his own original thing. But at one point I walked up to him and said, try these, and I put the glasses on him, and it helped. And he liked it. And so we said to the prop guy, get these exact glasses, because mine were prescription.
Yeah. I was like, how did he see?
And he got him, the empty glasses, and it was a great prop guy, Larry Dolan, and it was amazing how fast he'd come up with something. And that was it. Never took him off.
Well, the reason it's one of my favorite casting stories as an actor
Absolutely.
is it's the power of a personality of an actor and how everyone is so different, and that you could tell just, silently that he was right for the part. But I also now in, the present find this story also interesting because it could never happen today. Everything is put up as an individual little
clips.
And I've actually been a reader for pilots before here in New York, and I watched a casting director take someone's clip and just put it in the garbage.
Yeah.
And not even sent it to LA, make the decision for you, like those casting directors were doing.
Yeah.
Whereas you got the whole tape. So even though they made the decision for you, you were able to go through it. And so it's such a specific story that couldn't happen again.
Well, and I was going to say from another actor perspective is that when we talk about the trajectory of our careers and looking at your types and looking at that kind of thing, that the idea that your work as an understudy, as a cover, as a replacement, that those things do say something about your work and about your energy and who can replace Matthew Broderick. I mean, we're going to want a new one eventually. So where is that one? And I love for those of us who are performers like us to hear that your full resume can impact, and that little thing that you did, maybe you weren't the first star of it, but that does mean something about what you're able to produce.
No, that's it.
And also I think for Greg, since he
Greg
did go on to Ally McBeal, it's still a story that, you can be a great actor, but maybe not appropriate for that particular part, but your part will come along.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. As a matter of fact, Greg got the part because he was such a good actor. He was the best actor who gave the best performance up to that point. And so he got the part. But Diane knew that if she was going to write a series for 10 years, and a part that was such a linchpin part in her conception of the show, she had to hear the music that she had in mind. And that wasn't Greg's. Greg has this incredibly wonderful clipped, this really hyper-intellectual clip delivery, which is really fun, but it just wasn't Miles to her.
Now you mentioned this person before, but I just wanted to ask you, your wife had something to do with Murphy Brown once.
She sure did.
She's in one of our favorite episodes,
Indeed.
Actually. We talk about that episode
very
a lot.
excited.
On another plane. Well, she just called in. I should have put her on the line. That would have been brilliant. She could have phoned in from London. Oh my God. How stupid of me.
How was it directing your wife, or had you directed her before?
Well, I had. That's actually how we met. Those were the days when, it wasn't yet illegal to date somebody you worked with and who you admired and came to know over time in a same workplace environment. You can't do that anymore. We've been married for we're heading towards 40 years. Not exactly sure, but
congrats.
But yeah, so no, it worked out. But so I had worked with her before, but it's always a special, nerve-wracking, sort of thing. But Diane knew Nancy, and I think it was Diane's idea to have Nancy play that part. And Nancy, she plays the what we used to call stewardesses, the flight attendant on the plane that is about to crash, that Murphy and Frank are on, which causes them to flash back to various aspects of their lives or forward in their imaginations to their deaths. we keep going back and forth between these flashes and the crisis on the plane. And and Nancy has this wonderful ability to play, to try to keep it together while also going haywire. And so she was the flight attendant who's going haywire while giving you instructions about
And asking if you want nuts.
yes,
Yeah. The hitting on Frank part also was pretty hilarious.
and flirting with Frank, all that stuff. Yeah,
She's very distinct considering that it's a very small part of an hour episode. But she is one of the guest stars that I remember.
Me too.
And as we were doing research on you and I realized who she was, I went, oh, and it's, there's some small parts in the show that you don't necessarily, or all sitcoms you don't notice, but she stands out in my mind as one of the funniest.
Well, she became rightfully famous for coming in and delivering these odd comic moments. I mean, she has this great moment in Terms of Endearment. She plays this clueless, she gets what Jim Brooks said was the last laugh in the movie before it all goes to cancer. She's a clueless guest at a party, and she comes very cheerfully up to Deborah Winger and says, Patsy tells us you have cancer. My husband works for Ticketron and I'm in real estate, or something like that.
Oh, is that when she starts laughing?
Yeah, and Diane
I remember now.
Deborah Winger does a spit take, spits out her food in response to this clueless girl. That was Nancy. And then in John Sayles' movie Passion Fish, she has this long monologue of I didn't ask for the anal probe, about an actress who had to audition for the famous sci-fi movie, abduction movie. Mm-hmm. So Nancy's like a past master at this, and On Another Plane is one of many clueless characters she's played brilliantly.
It's okay. The best people play evil people, so clearly the smartest actors play the clueless ones.
That's true. No, it's a Judy Holliday quality. And by the way, segueing, I could talk about Nancy all day. I could talk about her part in Crocodile Dundee, but segueing off of Judy Holliday, I think that's the great quality that Faith had, because Faith.
Oh, great segue!
Absolutely.
Because Faith is a very, very intelligent, very strong woman inside this really wonderful, sunny, sweet, ingenuous package that we associate, or certainly up until that point culturally, were markers for a bimbo, which meant that she could represent everything that Murphy stood against as a woman. Somebody who was a woman who was preferred for these doll-like qualities, these Barbie doll kind of qualities, except for to last 10 years, she really had to be a formidable woman. And for Murphy to grow, she had to come to respect Corky. And when we started, and it didn't take that long, but it wasn't on day one, when we started, that for Candy, that was going to be like a real acting thing to come to, and a writing thing to come to live with Faith. Faith, I mean, Corky could have just been the annoying foil forever. She could have wound up being just that pain in the ass character who just was sure to make Murphy pissed off. Instead, they really became friends, admirers, colleagues over the course of the first couple years. That relationship grew incredibly, and it grew as Faith brought her own intelligence and strength to the part, and Candace came to just really love and admire her. And that's what you're seeing on screen. And of course the writers wrote to it, so it's a wonderful evolution.
The biggest surprise for me when we started this podcast and rewatching with a critical eye is how much I love Corky. I definitely was the little girl who grew up idolizing Murphy, and so I've talked in the podcast about how I did a thesis of Top Girls by Carol Churchill, and about the being raised at the in the prime of third wave feminism, and the idea of you have to become more masculine to succeed as a woman, and there were these certain qualities that definitely came into Murphy about that combo. And being an adult woman now, I find Corky's character to be incredibly moving and important. I think even the second episode, Devil with the Blue Dress On, comparing the two of them and what that conversation brought up, I love her character so much, and I'm continually surprised by the intelligence and the wisdom that she shows, not even knowing it.
It's true. It's true. I look at it I now look at it with hindsight, of course, but I'm telling you, we didn't actually know that. We didn't know all of that. We knew that she was going to make a great foil. We knew from the first time she said Shiite, that she was going to do all the wrong things, and everything about her look, everything about her poise. She delivered that beauty queen thing, so well. But we didn't know where. I don't think so. I mean, Diane tends to be pretty prescient. Diane might have known more than I did, but a lot of that was being discovered, and Faith in many ways showed us what the possibilities were, I think.
We talk a lot about how much we love that Faith wanted the part with the understanding that she wanted there to be growth.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
I mean, that's a lot of credit to an actor to feel empowered and invest that into her character.
Also, there's something else, which is that Faith is such a great sport. She's a great sport. She had a situation with somebody who's less internally secure than she is, would not have opened herself up to. She had to be the butt of a lot of jokes. She got teased a lot. We all teased each other mercilessly on the set. Candy's a prankster. We as you've heard stories, it was a very fun, loose rehearsal day in which, part of what took time was not just doing the lines. Part of what took time was sort of playing these games with each other, and the relationships that we're building off camera, bleeding into it. But Faith was always ready to play that part and not feel like she was the only other girl and the butt of the jokes, and we were pretty seriously incorrect in so many ways. I mean, it's a different time, but it was a bit of a fraternity on stage, with Candy being one of the guys, but Faith, gave as good as she got, and she was a riot. She was a riot to work with. One of the things that I had enormous fun with Faith and Grant and all the guys and Charlie and Joe is that when it comes, I'm a big fan of Punch and Judy. I'm a big fan of certain kind of slapstick. I love hitting. I love comic hitting.
Yeah, we noticed that.
We're going to definitely open the episode with that quote, by the way.
So whenever I got a chance, I could find a place, I would stage it and then ask one of them to hit one of them, and then they hit each other, kind of Abbott and Costello kind of stuff going on. And they all got so good at doing this to each other, and I never got, tired of it. But partly it was like a bunch of siblings. It was the kind of thing you can only do with your siblings. And so there was, I just thought pain is funny, but it also conveyed the sense that this office was a place where you went with siblings. You played, so that was a lot of fun.
Funny enough, we just recorded 2 episodes recently. Obviously, we're going in order. So we had done My Dinner with Einstein, which is full of just the 3 of them smacking each other.
Right?
Mm-hmm. Oh. Yeah, and Faith, Joe, and Grant all smacking each other in the background while things are going on, which is very Stooges.
Oh, I have to check that out. I haven't seen that in years.
They're hysterical. The boys are just being boys, and Faith looks like an exhausted mom just trying to get them to stop. It's hysterical. And they're always just in the background. But then we also were just talking, we're about to.
Yeah.
We're about to record The Unshrinkable Murphy Brown, and that opening is them on set as the set is building throughout production, and they're about to go into broadcast, and you have them playing basketball, and then you have what looks like Frank goosing Faith, and all this kind of physical humor, which informs a lot of their relationships. I really appreciate seeing that physicality in the background, which is maybe also a theater thing, but I think mainly it's something that we champion the show is that we don't get a lot of exposition dumping. A lot of relationships and information that comes out of dialogue or their interactions, and those physical relationships tell us a lot about these people.
I mean, that was the most fun. I've heard you guys talk about the other thing I've really always been very proud of that I consider myself an instigator on was Charlie Kimbrough reactions, because I would ask him, I'd say, you don't like the smell of that, and he would do that wrinkle up the nose thing the first time, and then from then on we all just cracked up. So then it became a signature thing, and my job was mainly after that was like say, Charlie's a wonderful actor, a man of great taste, and he wouldn't want to go to the well too often, and I'd say, no, I think we should. I'm sorry, it's still funny. Let's do that. And then all that stuff. Diane wrote in all these opportunities of like dancing, for example. So we had to ask the question, how do each one of them dance? So some of the physicality, the structure for that was written in, and that opened up whole worlds to us of behavior, and behavior is my favorite kind of thing.
Yeah, us too.
And Jim's dancing is a particular favorite of ours.
Yeah, I mean, it's like there's this little boy inside this super, the whole stiff thing, and there's this combination of a little boy, which is Charlie, inside there, because Charlie is a very soft, sweet, not soft, but I mean, he's a very loose guy. He's the opposite. You can't get a stiff to play a stiff. You don't want a stiff to play a stiff. They
don't understand the humor of it.
He's a very loose guy putting that thing on. There's also a musical comedian inside there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So there's a musicality to all these tiny gestures that are trying to bust out of his, facade, which I just love. I never get tired of.
Mm-mm.